Alrighty, and Black Stitch Hockey Cast episode 36 is underway. Once again, it is a Sunday night, 6/9/2024. We are one game into the Stanley Cup Finals on the precipice of the conclusion of the American Hockey League Conference Finals. We're on the eve of the PWHL draft. We're quickly approaching the NHL draft. And we're also setting all upon one of the greatest hockey-based websites of the 21st century. My second home following the death, the late, great Cap Geek. Capfriendly appears to be following suit, as unfortunate as that may be.
Yeah, as much as I love the promotion that Puckpedia is getting as its successor, it's like it's got a ways to go in terms of having as good of a user interface as well as the sort of like very fine details and features which are improving and moving in a good direction, but like it's gonna take a while for Puckpedia to be like the full-on like next big name in that particular market.
Yeah, it's a damn shame. Of course, we're always gonna have good old, good old reliable spot track. Not that they're ever going to be the remotely user friendly for
Yeah,
conceivably anybody.
yeah, and
But
honestly,
yeah,
they're lagging behind in the NHL respect in contrast with the other four major leagues as well. Like they're definitely a better resource for the rest of the big four than hockey. Like they don't. I've used them a couple of times, but it's never like my go-to just because their database, like they really need like have a ways to go and for like NHL consultation purposes.
I think a big part of that where the NHL out of the major leagues. I just feel like because of the existence of the hard cap, which we've all said our piece of not being supporters of on here on multiple occasions, but just because the NHL is legitimately the only sports league that has a legitimate true hard cap, I feel like it's the only, fan base out of the big four that actually has a very aggressive and constant use of a cap tracking. Because like basketball, I mean, understanding the salary cap in basketball is maybe something only, and maybe I'm over assuming, but I think only about what maybe 15% of basketball fans are genuinely aware of how the NBA's salary cap works because of all of its bizarre nuance due to player exceptions, the bird rule, bird contracts, bird years, base salary, rookies, like there's so much complexity to the NBA salary cap that your average fan isn't as engaged in it. And, in the NFL, due to the way guaranteed money is, and unlike the NHL and Major League Baseball, since the contracts aren't guaranteed, the salary cap in the NFL is effectively imaginary, to quote the Pat McAfee show, and I don't disagree with them, where, the NHL, with its fully guaranteed contracts and AAV-based hard cap from hell, I just feel like it's the only sports league where more than 75% of the fans have like a genuine interest and borderline need to have a user-friendly interface.
Even though Gary Bettman, by his own words, apparently does not agree with that sentiment, uh, which like I feel like his out of touch status with like what people want to know. You might even go as far as to say there's a good part of the NHL fan base that's actually more concerned with cap and contract related matters than they are with the raw statistical data of players in some respects. So it's like I think that his out of touch nature with the fan base and his working for the owners is probably what prevented what Mark Dumont said. And credit to him, like I don't agree with them 100% of the time, but he's still by and far my favorite person who is regularly working on the Montreal Canadiens beat. He's like, really, how this should have gone down is that the NHL should have acquired it and made it public. Uh, but we know damn well why it didn't happen, and it's entirely due to the fact that Bettman is working on behalf of the owners and not the fans, and to the point where he doesn't even know what they want.
Yeah, I
They want
mean,
that probably less than, in his eyes, annoying digital ads everywhere in game broadcasts. But go ahead.
at least the Washington Capitals the Capitals are going to probably do the most obnoxious thing in the history of sports. And I really thought about this after I read the news on Twitter earlier today, and I said, what the fuck are the Capitals going to use capfriendly.com from? Because, yes, they bought it. Yes, they shut it down. The Capitals are going to use that domain for something ridiculous. Some either fucking pretentious philanthropic thing about the Caps fucking helping the DC community. Like, it's coming. They're gonna try to turn Cap Friendly into some philanthropic fucking portal through the organization where they
So
can pretty much do.
my understanding of the contract that they worked out was that the domain would be blacked out outright, starting in July. And the basically the owners and facilitators of Cap Friendly are now going to be employees of the team per the agreement that they had. It's like my thought on that was like and I know this via like Eric Tulsky having done an AMA on Reddit a handful of years ago that every single team has an internalized platform for which they can search up on advanced analytics. So it's just like uh, think about this. An equally important part of your job is balancing the budget, especially with the restrictions that you have. So why don't you just already have an internalized platform for cap-related matters as well? Like, are NHL franchises just lacking that much in awareness of competent business ops that that's a blind spot for them?
Well, and to kind of, and maybe this is gonna get some hate if the PWHL community specifically in the state of hockey, digs their claws into this since it's directly relative. This definitely brings up a larger, looming, overarching narrative about, from a business perspective, how poorly run, maybe behind the scenes, professional hockey organizations can be run for sure. We look at what happened with, the infamous Dodonov trade, NTC debacle, and you really wonder, a lot of these guys, we look at guys like Briere, we look at guys like Verbeek, just looking at guys in our own backyards who have, substantial hockey ops backgrounds, perspective, etc. Obviously, assistant GMs, everybody's very much aware of Keith Jones's involvement in Philadelphia, as well as, any number of AGMs across the league. It really begs a higher level question of like, we're aware of the hockey ops side things, but I think a lot of people forget that the term general manager in a professional sports world is not just exclusive to the hockey ops side of the organization. And you look at the lack of fine tooth comb details for dollars and cents, bonus overages, etc. Where we look at here with having to outsource cap guys. You look at what happened with PWHL Minnesota and the recent parting of ways with Natalie Darwitz. And I really thought that the press release from Jana Hefford last night pretty much spelled this out of, yeah, the building was full. Yeah, the team won games. Sure. From the outside world, the hockey ops side was great, and we offered her a role in hockey ops. But based on third-party audits of how our organizations were running, that particular team was being run fairly poorly compared to everybody else. And it really like begs the question, like at the NHL level, and specifically looking glaring effectively at Stan Bowman and the Chicago Blackhawks during his tenure, and the legitimate crimes that were being committed by staffers of that team, like how poor, like the GM roles in the NHL beyond in really professional hockey, as we've seen, like and this is gonna get me shit if it makes it to the PWHL Minnesota world, but I don't give a shit. Like if Natalie Darwitz was doing a poor job on the actual like day-to-day operations side of things and managing the actual business side of it, not just the hockey ops side, I'm glad that the PWHL made the move that they did because it's prioritizing a healthy, strong business organization in the fledgling league. And I wish that the fucking NHL would take a page out of that playbook when we look at a guy like Don Sweeney, who signed, Mitch Miller last year, and on multiple occasions the Boston Bruins have not, done good work on their day-to-day, their background. And we could say this for any number of teams that have had, their share of internal strife. We look at how Nick Boynton's, Nick Boynton's, mental health issues were diagnosed and treated by some of his former teams. The day-to-day ops of a lot of teams in the National Hockey League are probably run very badly because we continue to hire guys specifically with a fucking focus on hockey ops instead of, day-to-day upper middle management ops, where like the culture of some of these teams could be way more treacherous than any of us realize. Like, there's a reason the NFL, most NFL GMs are not former players, because it's a much larger and complex operation. And I'm really starting to wonder if the obsession with hockey ops, and specifically hiring hockey dev and hockey ops players into overarching professional management roles, is actually a big overarching underlying problem in the league.
Yeah, like I've like definitely been like entertaining the notion that the standard professional back background that more people should be coming from, uh, rather than elevating ex players and ex coaches, is there should be standardized to like even if to hire like former player agents, which you see occasionally. Think every single one of those guys is a licensed attorney that's familiar with relevant contract laws and all sorts of other things, or even just having people with a law background. I mean, that's what the Red Sox did with Theo Epstein, and why they had such an advantage on the market was like someone with like a nuanced understanding of things. And like having Tulsky, a guy with a Harvard degree, you know, who came from an advanced stat tracking background, and just like in an important role, currently with an interim tag, but we'll see if that changes in the future. Like it's just like Carolina really like took a major step up from having like an old head like Don Waddell around, in moving to that, at least for the time being, in terms of just being somewhat innovative, uh, in terms and just like thinking more forward and like moving on from the old boys club thing. And I'm hoping that this is the establishment of some sort of precedent.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, to really look at a team that has had some pretty fucking remarkable success recently, effectively, when you look at a team that's doing, I think, some really good work. Um, the Colorado Avalanche, I feel like, are the team that kind of cracked the code on this. Where like, what did they have to do to win the Stanley Cup? What did they do across, you know, uh, changes? And it really is, you know, the, Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic was a clear indicator of, a well-run organization. We're like, and I look at what the Hurricanes are going forward. I think the Hurricanes looked at the Avalanche and realized, like, Joe Sakic is the president of hockey operations for the Avalanche. Chris McFarland coming in, though, and basically becoming the day-to-day operations, general manager for the team, really ended up being, like he was the assistant GM to Sakic circa 2013 or 14, 15. So like, you know, Colorado figured it out like pretty early into Sakic's tenure there of like having a guy who is, an educated businessman doing the day-to-day stuff and having a hockey player who just understands hockey seems to be like the way that I think teams should probably start going. And I think with any luck, if the NHL figures that out in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe they'll be able to continue their growth and, be, make something of, really start to be the league and the brand that we think they're going to be. Um, you and to come back to the PWHL side of things here, like, um, and they talked about it, and I enjoy what they did. Like, I enjoy how they brought in hockey icons in the first year, but even Hefford talked about how year one was year one. I mean, we got people in, we got the brand recognition, and now we need to make business decisions. And and I've said it before with the PWHL as a league and the opportunity that they have to not do what the NHL does. And I feel like the Darwitz situation is a great example of like, hey, this market just won a championship. There's an opportunity to be more business focused instead of hockey focused. And I'm cautiously optimistic for that league that they're going to figure this out by year 3, where the NHL looks like they're going to figure this out maybe around year 115. But hey, what do I know? You like as I've rolled out my mock drafts for the PWHL, and um, sorry. Like talking about why Britta Curl, despite her off the ice incidents, is included in all of this, and how like you know to have our traditional moment of acceptance in something I've explained on multiple communities, and really just wanted to echo the sentiment of why Britta Curl is included in our rankings heading into the draft tomorrow. Just because somebody does things that are culturally unacceptable and inappropriate does not mean you get to erase them from history. Changing narratives and erasing history is what bad people do. As members of the media, our job is to not be bad people and try to change history, including a player who has had questionable behavior. If they are ranked 4th overall on our draft rankings and they don't get drafted, you can do some research as to why. But I'm not about to pretend this player doesn't exist. And people didn't pretend Josh Hosang didn't exist when he had his off-ice incidents. People aren't pretending Trevor Connolly doesn't exist. Hell, people didn't even pretend Mitch Miller didn't exist. We didn't pretend Logan Mayo didn't exist. Like, trying to pretend people who have questionable character backgrounds that are good at sports didn't exist is not the right way to go about
Right.
things.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that last example is kind of a quagmire situation because he himself renounced himself in the draft and asked teams not to select him. And then, of course, my favorite executive of all time, Mark Bergevin, heavy sarcasm, went ahead and took him anyway. Uh, in general, yeah, I definitely like it's a good like broader point. I do agree with that. Just like especially like when looking at like the possibility that there is potential for like restorative justice there, and like you know just uh to be mindful of like just the overall picture and like you know note that the overall contributions that are possible have to be kept in the conversation in some way or another.
Yeah, and then you have the opposite case with Taro and Buffalo. So, you know,
Yeah, bringing an imaginary player into reality. I wasn't expecting this to go there, and
I
hey,
know like it feels like a natural culmination of like because I've been like going off about like when Bergevin was looked now from like possibly departing the Kings to maybe like having a role alongside Don Waddell in Columbus, and how like much I've just I mean even last week I think like I talked about how poorly his handling of so many culture related aspects where he was in Montreal, and then including that as well as that particular draft snafu, for lack of a better term, and like yeah, now there's this possibility that rather than being part of the problem in Los Angeles, he might go be part of a whole new set of problems for the Blue Jackets organization. So
Columbus, man.
you know, what the fuck did the city of Columbus do to deserve the Blue Jackets decision making as an org? Like, the Columbus Blue Jackets, like, I
Maybe it's just the universe mistook Columbus being responsible for Christopher Columbus, and maybe that's just where all this negative impact is coming from.
now I have to. Is it believed? And this is the question. And I was reading about things, and I'm trying to get my train of thought back. Um, are the Blue Jackets? And I don't remember if it's them. I know it is one team. Are they the ones whose arena is built on a Native American burial ground? Somebody in North America is. I don't think it's them, but it's starting to fucking feel like it. Like,
Yeah.
and like, it's not like McConnell is like the worst owner in sports. Like, he's fairly like irrelevant. It's not like, he's, you know, when you Google him, he's not like other guys who have, copious amounts of blood on his hands for all the awful deeds that he's done to become wealthy.
like Henry Samueli allegedly.
Hey, man, Henry Samueli was just illegally backdating stock options. I mean,
Allegedly.
allegedly backdating stock options under the Bush administration, which he got pardoned for, and I believe some sort of medal from George W. I mean, hey, Henry Samueli pays his blood debt through actual philanthropy, and his efforts as the owner of the organization
Yeah.
have been,
Yeah, I mean, I think Anaheim is one of the teams like internally that have like a ton of great PR headlines that don't have anything as to that have come to light that have really like balance it out on the negative side. Like they have a much cleaner slate than a lot of operations with bigger money kicking around, and just a better of higher esteem, rightfully or not.
I mean, really the only thing you can hold against the Samuelis as owners, and I'm biased in their defense on this because my favorite color is orange is in the top two, is their commitment to the color orange and the Anaheim Ducks branding and the fact that they're never going to revert back to plum and teal full time because of their love of Orange County. That's really the only thing that you can hold against them is
Well,
denying hockey fans the world over what they want.
I'd say I'd say really the biggest one is that the thing that's been consistent throughout multiple management regimes throughout his entire ownership is that all of them have expected players to take lower deals just because it's a smaller market, as if they can't actually afford to pay them. And like have seen that manifested quite a number of times within just like the last decade, never mind before that even.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a reason a lot of players don't want to play there as well for that reason, as well as those incredibly low California income tax rates definitely help them as well in their recruiting process. Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
just
remarkable to think that taking all of that into account, somehow Radko Gudas chose them over every team in Canada. Really makes you wonder about Radko Gudas's decision-making process.
I guess he just really, really wanted to be fairly close to the Pacific Ocean. But yeah, it's just like low salaries combined with high tax rates. Like it's just like it's not that it. They've done everything they can, and I honestly think at this point it's pretty remarkable that as it currently stands, they've been run better than their two Californian rivals in recent memory. Because like the Kings don't get enough shit for how much of a mess that they've turned into in recent times. Starting at the very top, in fact, like we know that there, and I guess I can give some shout outs to Hardcore Dowdy over on X for really illuminating this. Like, their ownership is basically in full on Jerry Jones mode of really having to be involved in every single decision that gets made, all the way down to some of the nitty gritty aspects of roster construction, which is a recipe for disaster. Uh, but bearing in mind, just like the Ducks don't want to pay out, and more in like the fiscal related matters of the uh, state of California itself, like I can see why it's just not really a sought after destination by the free agent market.
Yeah, yeah. But hey, as of next year, these California teams are going to be pretty drippy with some shout. I love how Aesthetics pretty much got bullied into doing more research for when the Ducks rebrand was going to happen, and I really wonder if he regrets in that video hinting at what he hinted at. Either way, though, it's gonna be a nice surge of revenue to probably the Ducks more than the Kings. As we know, the Ducks had a massive increase in regional viewership during the 23-24 campaign for really no conceivable reason, to be honest with you. It's like, yeah, they were remarkably better than they were during the 22-23 campaign. But I mean, the massive surge in revenue they're going to get from a new uniform set the year after they had a limited edition uniform set, it's definitely nice for a team that, doesn't like to pay their players, where, if the Samueli family finally sees some hockey related fucking profits, perhaps we finally get to a chance or a point where they're actually going to open up the checkbook. Not a lot. I don't think the Ducks are ever going to legitimately be a capped out team, but I mean, a guy making at least $9 million a year, potentially being on the horizon would be a nice change. And obviously, money in, money out. Which brings us to developmental leagues and a little bit of AHL updates, if you're willing to take the floor on that, Liam.
Yeah. So as most are in the know of at this point, the Saginaw Spirit did indeed end up lifting the Memorial Cup that they hosted, and there are a lot of times when the host wins the tournament, it ends up looking Mickey Mouse. But we got to keep in mind this was a team that was like that had the second best record in the toughest league this year, and was the only team that served as any sort of threat to the London Knights. Uh, but like they played each other 12 times a year, 12 times this season. And it's like at some point London was bound to have a bad game against them, and they were going to look pretty lethal in that matchup, especially with Dale Hunter running three lines throughout that entire postseason run. because it's very well established that the Bolton brothers certainly weren't there to play hockey. It's like, you know, sure. Were they well rested and able to recuperate from their injuries? Yeah, but let's also note that, they severely had their postseason run truncated by that too. Because like Perek missed a couple of games towards the end of their run, and of course we know he ended up being very essential to that squad when it came time for them to shine on the brightest stage. Uh, Nolan Lalonde, credit to him, he's a very serviceable backup above that, and I can see why Columbus gave him that undrafted free agent deal. But like to have, but Andrew Oak was so reliable for them in the crease that for him to go down was also a big blow. So I definitely think that they earned that. So credit to those guys for earning their first hardware in franchise history. Congratulations to Montreal Canadiens prospect Owen Beck for winning tournament MVP. Both of these teams are probably going to be threats again next year. I could see Perek running it back and just cutting his teeth a little bit more, even if he does go high in the draft. They got at least another season of Michael Misa, and I think London will be back as well, especially if they have all their all their CHL eligible guys return. They're probably just going to end up in the same spot. Like, we're going to see probably at least one more year where both of those teams are far and ahead, the best teams throughout that entire umbrella organization. But yeah, over in the A, the Cleveland Monsters are, taking it one game at a time per their own declaration. They have now forced a game 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals, so if the Hershey Bears are going to defend their title, they're going to have to put up with a little bit more resistance. From baby CBJ. Over in the Western Conference, though, Disco Dan Bielsma has, in his final season before taking the reins with the parent club, has led the Coachella Valley Firebirds to yet another Calder Cup Finals appearance, with that making their second appearance in a row. We might have a rematch in next year, but we'll see how it closes out in the East. And of course, the Charlotte Checkers and Florida Panthers coast affiliate, the Florida Everblades, have won their third consecutive Kelly Cup. This actually marks the first time in ECHL history we've had a three-peat. This is also their fourth title overall. Credit to them for this historic achievement. And I guess that about closes it out for this week's edition.
Awesome. Speaking of Zane Perek, I wonder where he's going to get drafted. He's probably the most interesting player to me right now in this draft class, especially with the recent reports, whether or not they're smoke and mirrors, that the Chicago Blackhawks are locked in on Artyom Levshunov at 2, which, if those reports are accurate, is certainly fascinating for Chicago. If we're in a world where Celebrini is 1 and Levshunov is 2, I mean, Perek to me at that point, it really comes down to, between him and, Dickinson and Bouillon, but like, I don't know, like, I sit here and I look at a team like Anaheim and like, I feel like at 3, your choices are effectively between Lindstrom, Demidov, and Perek at that point. Maybe Berkeley Catton.
Yeah, the indication I've gotten from Chicago, like in either way, like capacity, they're not looking to add like a traditional, smaller, like skill-based blue line addition because I've alternatively heard Levshunov and Dickinson from them, which is just like Dickinson is interesting because he impacts so many areas of the game. Just like is not the most engaged dude in the offensive zone. Can facilitate from back there. As evidenced by his assist totals, but like he's really just an impact guy. And I think the distinction, like his plus minus was like a plus 56 in contrast with Oliver Bonk's plus 28, which is one of those things where like when there's like that much of a distinction that actually shows that where that's actually is an instance where the plus minus actually does mean something. But it's like, you know, this is one of those things where having the big bodies that are available in this class might actually affect the order where the highest ceiling guys based off of impact via skill are not the ones getting taken high, just based off of like, the fact that like uh, the ships seem to be falling that way where one of those big D guys seem to be virtually destined for the top three at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the thought of either a Silayev or a Dickinson to Chicago, and like I don't actually understand where the logic's coming from Chicago of like they've got a lot of blue line prospects as it stands at this point. Like they fielded fucking 5 defensemen on their roster throughout the year that were under 23. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's clear and obvious that Connor Bedard, the Blackhawks should be taking best available, and they should be taking best available forward. Like, I don't logically understand why the Black. I cannot, as a human being, as a hockey nerd, comprehend why the Blackhawks would not take one of either Ivan Demidov or fucking Berkeley Catton at this point in time. Like, I can't comprehend why you have two potential game-breaking scoring players to play either with or the line below Bedard. When you already have spent so much draft capital on your blue line, I just, I don't know. Like, if you're gonna feed these minutes to Kevin Korchinski and Wyatt Kaiser, like, why are you gonna go out and try to get? Why are you gonna just go out and log jam your own blue line?
Yeah, uh, especially because when you have your linchpin be like, see, when it comes to adding bigger guys, like the only team like drafting in the top five that can really benefit in like a very, or at least the one who can benefit from the most from adding size and grit. Not to say that all of those bigger guys are limited to just that. Like Montreal has the most to gain from it just based off of the fact that Martin St. Louis is trying to take them in a very Rod Brind'Amour-esque direction based off of his own declarations, which is why we've discussed like Caden Lindstrom as someone who really makes sense for them. But it's like when your linchpin for your whole team is like a generational skill player, like your next goal should be something that supplements that well and meshes with it rather than being like completely incongruous.
Yeah, but hey, man, yeah, maybe Kyle Davidson will surprise us. Maybe he won't. De- definitely a lot of definitely a lot of good discussion. I definitely think this is going to be one of the most chaotic drafts in the last 20 years of the NHL,
Yeah.
just based on the fact that there's not only not even a consensus top two, like I I can see quite from when I look at a list of Artem Levshunov, Anton Silayev, Ivan Demidov, Lindstrom, Buyum, Catton, Parekh, Aginla, Iserman, Senek, and Dickinson, and even to some degree Consta Hellenius. Like when I look at those 12 fucking guys, only 9 of those 12 humans are going to be top 10 picks.
Yeah, Seneca, like I have to give Beckett Seneca some of the benefit of the doubt because some of his peculiarities in his D0 year was that he basically hit his growth spurt at the worst possible time. And it's like, and then you kind of have to readjust to like the new working parts that come from having suddenly gotten much bigger. But like, it's just when I think about him, like he's definitely a guy benefiting from his physical profile and the fact that he shot in at like a ridiculously what should be considered unsustainable clip. Uh, as I talked about in my big finish several weeks ago, that would be considered, a statistical outlier, but was called growth when it happened for him. Because we talk about prospects and NHL stars in vastly different ways, even when like it's not called for to distinguish these two things. So it's just like if it happens, it's definitely going to be one of those reach picks rather than something that's like happening rightfully.
Yeah, out of everybody picking in, the top 13, I don't. It's going to be a reach, and I think the sad thing is the team that probably makes the most sense for Seneca is probably Dallas with their, at this point, god tier, gold plated, gold legendary prospect development trajectories they've had.
Mm-hmm.
Where you look at a team that can take an anomaly and somehow find a way to turn a fucking anomalous statistical outlier into the norm is kind of what Dallas is. Unfortunately, he's not gonna last to probably 29.
Pretty much.
But luckily for us, all these kids are like 18 years old, and luckily for them, and as unluckily for them, hockey will always be the hardest sport to project how these kids are going to turn out because they're fucking 18 years old. We don't know what they look like in pro style systems, so there's the silver lining, as opposed to tomorrow night's PWHL draft where everybody is 23 years old, give or take. What I like to call the college football debacle and the college football enigma of to the day I die, I'll never understand how NFL teams fuck up the draft as often as they do, provided all the film and knowledge they have of these athletes. With that said, I know there's been a lot of discussion around PW circles heading into tomorrow night's draft that with the coaching change for PWHL New York, the expectation that the former Colgate coach is going to draft his former star in Serdashny, but like we've read this story before, we've been here before in other leagues. Like this isn't Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer didn't draft Justin Fields over fucking Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, and the same logic applies here. Of like. New York's not going to take Serdashny because she had chemistry with the coach. Like, Sarah Fillier is the best pure goal scorer not currently playing in the PWHL. And in a league with a goaltending save percentage of 92.2 on average, right-handed scorers who can score at a fucking goal per game clip in the NCAA, you know, there's only one of those, and it's Sarah Fillier. Like, you're not going to pass up on this isn't the NHL where we look at Cole Iserman and say, oh, yeah, he's a god tier goal scorer. Well, anyway, he's the 12th best player available. Like, I just don't see a universe where fucking Fillier is in
And that's
Ottawa.
just
Like,
amongst North American skaters to top it off.
there's no way Fillier doesn't go one. I would be shocked if anybody besides Serdashny goes two tomorrow night. And pick number 3 is where the shit kind of hits the proverbial fan of, Minnesota tomorrow night has so many options. I mean, for me personally, if I was sitting in the chair, I'm taking Izzy Daniel because, a prolific two-way scoring winger, right-handed shot who can, like, when I put her stats into a fucking vacuum, like, Sarah Fillier is the best NCAA D1 scoring player we've seen in women's college hockey in a D0 type season in this decade so far, combining her goals per game aggregates and her goal creation. Izzy Daniel is less than one standard deviation off of her stats. Like, I think people don't realize just how fucking good Izzy Daniel is. The fact that we're talking about her as a third overall pick who may even slide into the second or third round is borderline unconscionable as a hockey fan that loves analytics. Like, players with her like scoring skill curve just and I know there's a lot of Hannah Bilka fans out there, rightfully so. She is a great player. She's a great forward. El Harji, real good player. Gosling, really good. Gardner, really good coming out of the NC Dub. And the only other player I can conceivably like that I would pick over her potentially is Kayla Barnes, but she's a right-handed shot. Sophie Jacks is a right-handed shot. You'd be better off waiting and grabbing if you're looking for an OFD, Mae Batherson, in the second round, or getting like Simpson or another, two-way player who's left-handed to balance out. Because like, man, Lee Steckline is not getting any younger, and having a prolific top pairing of two elite. I mean, Sophie Jax's model, or Sophie Jigs, pardon me, coming out of college is insane. It's a shame Courtney Kessler couldn't fucking figure out how to use her correctly. Unfortunately, Boston's going to pay for that with their life for the net. Like they already paid for that in the championship last year. They may pay for that for the next decade. But like, if I'm Minnesota, it's Izzy Daniel. If I'm Boston, it's got to be Kayla Barnes to replace the mistake of not properly developing Sophie Jacks a year ago. If I'm Montreal, I think everybody and their mother knows it's going to be Claire Thompson at 5. And then Toronto has the fun of they can pretty much take whoever Minnesota doesn't take, be it Bilka, be it Gosling, be it Gardner, be it any of them, and they're going to be good. Or they take Batherson.
So, a thought that came into my head. Obviously, you weren't able to draw up an equivalency model due to a lack of data, but just based off of what you have available in terms of raw info, along with whatever else you might have accrued, like because I know Ian Kennedy wrote this a fair bit. Is there anyone who you think from the U Sports environment is worth keeping an eye on for this draft?
I think the consensuses, Fecto has, I think, the ceiling to be a solid middle nine potential player. And a defenseman, I don't recall her first name, Burgesson, I think could be a bottom four defender in the league. I think there's probably about two U Sports players, but again, Fecto she's based more on a hypothetical model
Yeah,
of her two-way capabilities.
right.
Burgesson, same kind of energy of like definitely the strongest two-way defender in U Sports. Aside from them, with the incredibly limited data I have available for youth sports and just the overall difficulty of having visibility, we're all aware of each other's schedules in here. Not for nothing, covering NCAA D1 men's, D1 women's to some capacity last year, D3 men's.
Yeah, I hear you.
Not to disrespect north of the border, but youth sports is a really tough sell.
Yeah,
During the hockey season.
yeah, and I mean, like as we discussed at fair length, like you know, they're always going to be on the fringes of impacting the next level because they just really failed to develop it up there, like that for reasons that probably partially that are pretty understandable, but like just for the nature of the topic at hand, like they're just they aren't putting out a ton into the next level of competition. But you know who is pretty well represented these days? The Ontario Hockey League in this ongoing Stanley Cup final. Friggin' 18 players on both teams. So what were our impressions from game one since we haven't discussed it yet?
You know,
Bobrovsky.
yeah, I kind of agreed with pretty much everything Connor McDavid said at the end of the hockey gods came for us. The hockey gods let us get Game 6 in Dallas in a game that we definitely shouldn't have
Oh
won.
yeah.
And the hockey gods very rapidly claimed their revenge in Game 1.
Yeah, I remember I think they were maybe like a 37.3% on the deserve to win a meter for game 7 against Vancouver as well.
Yeah, the hockey gods, Edmonton's had some magical ass pulls in elimination games on this playoff run. And, like, to be fair to them and to McDavid, really, a lot of people kind of scoffed at his hockey gods comment, but, like, the self-awareness from the leader in the room of, like, it really comes back to some classic Star Trek. You can do everything right and still lose. So, like, if you're the Chris Knobloch, you don't fucking change anything in game 2. Like, look, Sergei Bobrovsky is Sergei Bobrovsky. Like, Jeremy Swayman gave a Bobrovsky-level performance for the Bruins in game 1 against the Panthers. And the Bruins did not win that series because usually the team that's getting, the knee on their throat for 60 minutes every night, unless you have, I can't think off of the top of my head of a team that had their opponent's knee on their throat 60 minutes a game for an entire series that somehow fucking pulled it out and won.
Buffalo, maybe with Hasek.
Yeah, but I can't, like, nothing. One, it was a little before my time, and analytics tracking in those games isn't what it was now, so you can't even be like,
Yeah.
like, if they encountered the Legion of Doom at any point in their various playoff runs, it's highly likely Philly had their knee on their throat for a lot of those games, but, like, there's just not the micro stats and analytics to back up, Dominic Hasek versus God.
Yeah, I mean Edmonton. I mean they're 5-1 this postseason after losing a game. So I mean I think Edmonton is as good as anybody after a loss. So I mean in some of those games were like 6-1. I think one of the games against LA was like a 6-1 flogging. And again Vancouver, I think there was at least one blowout. So I mean Edmonton's they're one of the best bounce back teams.
Yeah, yeah. The way I've said on it is like obviously like the expected goals shares and expected goals percentage, etc. stats were kind of inflated by their power play presence because like I've noticed stat trackers like uh, do tend to exaggerate the impact on the power play, but I mean you look at it like just as with the first period as a microcosm alone, of the 14 shots on goal that Edmonton registered, 7 of them were considered high danger. And like, it's not going to happen like it's a 50% clip all the time, but they are going to be generating numbers, like, especially with the man advantage, like that throughout the whole series. And it's unlikely that, you know, uh, Bobrovsky is going to be recording shutouts under circumstances like that, probably even one more time in this series. Never mind, you know, for 4 games. Like, so there's eventually, like, and I also think they didn't do themselves some favors either. Like, there are times where, like, the shot selection was not what it should have been. They were trying to beat him down low way too often, which kind of mystified me because you got to elevate in order to get one past Bob. I can't imagine they're going to make that same mistake again. So I like their chances still, but of course I really, think Florida presents a good challenge to them too, considering they have all the advantages that Dallas did in the matchup, but more than just that as well. Considering like their uh, top 6 forwards group is a lot better than the Stars, I'd say.
Also, you got to take into account as well, Edmonton spends about $13 million a year for 2 players who actively hinder their ability to win between Cody Ceci and Darnell
You know
Nurse,
what's funny
who,
about their defensive core too is like it would be better if they didn't have those two play together. Like if you split them up into different pairings, they would be a lot better off. But Knobloch just has completely nixed even having that thought for whatever reason.
Like it fucking kills me how that pairing apart. Like Cody Cece with anybody else on that team is like a mild negative impact player. Like Cody Cece's Cody Cece, and I don't really need to explain. Everybody knows what that means if they've watched Cody Cece play enough hockey. And like Darnell Nurse is also like Darnell Nurse is the Benjamin Watson of the NHL, where like great heart guy, great pardon the stutter, effort hustle guy. But man, the perception of his talent level versus what he actually brings to the table is it's not what people like. So you watch, basically, it's just two guys you really don't want to have out on the ice together at the most important times. And unfortunately for Oilers fans, they've been treated to it pretty consistently this postseason, and they're going to get another helping of it. Like, sad.
Yeah.
As a team that was trotting out, Kevin Shattenkirk and John Klingberg at one point a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
this depresses me more. Shout out to Kevin Shattenkirk for being Kevin Shattenkirk. Man, I guess if if Darnell Nurse is the Benjamin Watson of defensemen, then I guess Kevin Shattenkirk is probably like the Scott Chandler of defensemen, where like he had one or two really impressive red zone or special teams years, and for some reason everybody's just built this like there during his apex there was this thought that he was a top 10 defenseman in the league, much like Scott Chandler's last couple years of his run in Buffalo.
I feel like I feel like we kind of fell for it to a degree because I think about that 2015 Patriots season, and we did think that that tight end combination was going to be a lot better than it ended up being. Like, off the field and legal matters aside, like, and of course, that's not to diminish what happened, but like, we thought they would have like a supplement to some degree of like what they lost with the Hernandez matter, but that certainly did not end up panning out. Not that it helped that Gronk yet again got injured that season.
And I'm going to use this to leverage into our big finish, because once Scott Chandler comes up on a hockey podcast, you're nearing the end.
I mean, it didn't help that I like I had to bring in the. I mean, let's be real. Any chance to bring up innovation when talking about a sport that often lacks it in many respects, like you know, just thinking about it in like the context of like the gridiron, like the Gronkowski Hernandez thing, like that tandem did change the NFL and like how people think about the way they construct offenses. But like bringing it into the conversation is kind of asking for trouble a little bit. But shoot, I had something. It was. Oh yeah, now I remember. It was about yet again how I've been disappointed about marketing in terms of presentation about the junior hockey leagues. It's been kind of humorous. Like I understand where the Youngstown Phantoms general manager has been coming from, being so vocal about how a U.S. based network like the NHL network should be doing for the Clark Cup what the NHL network did for the Memorial Cup. And it's because it's like, but I can kind of see both sides of it because as it stands, like the CHL is still the biggest feeder league. And the USHL is coming away. Is like their goal for a while has been make kids pro ready and not just continue to be an NCAA feeder system. And they are getting there. We are seeing more guys who aren't just USNTDP guys getting signed straight into the NHL from the USHL. but it's like he's talking, but like when talking about should the Clark Cup be on the NHL Network, it's like the thing is where it's arguably not even that big of a benefit. There was a significant tape delay on the NHL Network's broadcasting of the Memorial Cup this year, and you can't even use the excuse of or like justify it by saying like you know, transferring the broadcast you know, takes time, the budget is low. The thing is, this year's Memorial Cup was fucking held in the United States. It was held in fucking Michigan. So there was no valid justification for why that presentation went as poorly as it did. So it's like before we even talk about should the USHL be elevated by the institution in the same manner that the CHL is, it's like the NHL network and NHL related entities are not even doing a good job at promoting the CHL as it is. And as I've reflected on a number of times, whenever it's been handled by a national broadcast, it's been botched. Like even TSN didn't do a great job this year. So it's like we need to get to a point where the elevation and promotion of the CHL is actually beneficial to the league itself before we talk about the USHL getting that same treatment, because it would probably do more harm to the USHL than good if it's going to be some Mickey Mouse bullshit like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think just two big pointers. I think one area that Edmonton can definitely improve on would definitely help them a lot more. I think which again they obviously outplayed Florida would be the face-off dot. I mean they got dogged 60-40, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean even out shooting a team almost 2-1. I mean you think about if those numbers were flipped, and I mean at that point what maybe 40 shots, like but I think that would be a huge opportunity for Edmonton. The other thing is, I just honestly want to say, like, I'm not gonna obviously Christian and I have kind of talked a little bit about the whole PWHL Minnesota stuff. But for me, I just want to say I love Ken Klee. Uh, he's always dapper. I really enjoyed a lot of his the live little videos that they had of him in the locker room before the two playoff series. I honestly thought he was a very inspirational head coach. I think great locker room guy. I think he set the standard and just set the bar so high for Minnesota. And for me, I think Ken Klee, I haven't really seen a ton of media on Ken Klee as far as how big of a piece he was in PWHL Minnesota's success. But for me, honestly, like if it wasn't for him, I'm really not too sure if they would ultimately end up winning. But just a quick nod to Ken Klee. Keep doing what you do, guy. I love it, even if I am a PWHL Boston supporter. Obviously, I
I
support. I love.
I just wanted to give a sorry.
No, I hear, bro.
Wanted to give a shout out to the guys over at the Score. Um, Crashing my computer before this. Kyle Cushman. Wanted to give him a shout out for getting some microstat cards into the PWHL world. From one analytics nerd to another, it's nice to see somebody with, 4-digit followers over on Twitter getting analytics into women's hockey so that we know that we're not the only ones.
Yeah, man, that community is, like when you look at those great top tier creators out there, exemplified by that and by like, the ones who really paved the way over at the Ice Gardens, like, just some outstanding work being done that makes things possible for us, give us a foundation to build upon. To tie things back to an earlier conversation, I need you to know that laugh that I stifled was because I looped all the way back to having the thought of we can't pretend Aaron Hernandez never existed. How's that for like a whole ass Ouroboros, huh?
I take my cap off to you, sir.
Man, but thank you for those who tuned in. Thank you to those in the not so far off future who are listening on Spotify when this gets thrown up on there. We'll see how this Stanley Cup final shakes up. We'll see how different discourse all comes together. There'll be plenty to talk about because, like, within every single one of these things, there's a lot of different narratives. So, it'd be fun to pick the games apart. Upcoming draft selections, PWHL draft tomorrow, NHL draft next month. Maybe this year we'll actually see some trades on night one, or as we didn't at all last season, which still amazes me. But yeah, take care, everybody. We'll see you again same time next week.